I feel like as I sit with men, they bring that element of being physically unhealthy, which is then impacting their mental health and their emotional health into their relationships. And so then when you go and say, hey, I'd like to communicate, or I don't feel connected, or I'd like to do X, Y, and Z, there's no bandwidth. There's no reserve left to receive that. And a lot of their shutting down and checking out or whatever else is purely a lack of energy.
Men need to feel like they're striving for something, right? That brings purpose, that brings meaning to their own individual life. But as we get further into our life, we don't then remake what that is, right? So we're in a marriage, we're in our job, we need a new aim.
Welcome to Whole Plus, the podcast that embraces and tackles the holistic way, bringing it all together: science, research, innovations in technology, and our collective human experience. This is where science and spirit come together. I'm Dr. Taz, your host and a double board certified medical doctor, an integrative health expert, a nutritionist, and an acupuncturist. I'm also the founder and CEO of Whole Plus, a digital and clinical platform where my team and I practice evidence-based holistic medicine every single day. I know and I hear all the health and wellness noise that's out there. I want this show to be the one to empower you with the knowledge you need to heal not just your body, but your relationships, your communities, and our world. Welcome to Whole Plus. Marriage satisfaction is something that is so debated in today's relationships. I've been married 21 years, and I'm going to be 100% honest with you guys. We've had our highs, but we've definitely had some lows. I am so thrilled, therefore, to bring on my next two guests. Jocelyn and Aaron Freeman, both known as the Freemans, are a powerhouse husband and wife team transforming relationships. As marriage coaches with master's degrees in psychology, authors, and hosts of the top-ranked Empowered Couples podcast, they blend real talk wisdom with research-backed tools to help couples break unhealthy patterns and build lasting connections. Their viral content reaches over 17 million people monthly, and their sold-out workshops and thriving Instagram community make them go-to voices for couples ready to deepen their partnership and model intentional love for the next generation. Please join me in welcoming the Freemans. I'm so happy to have you both on the show. There's a timeliness that I'll explain later, but I've got to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Can being in the wrong relationship actually make you physically sick?
100%. I've been sick, not only just in the wrong relationships where there's just a lot of unhealthy dynamics, but even when conflict occurs, even in the right relationship. I mean, there's been times where we've had, conflicts, especially earlier on in our relationship where we didn't have the tools and skills, where I definitely am more susceptible to even like getting a cold, being run down, not operating as well. But definitely I've experienced in more toxic, unhealthy relationships where you just can't even thrive. I even think about as a teenager and my parents going through their divorce.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, I mean, I see now why maybe that was part of all the acne that I had.
Right.
Was the amount of stress that I was
happened
under.
to me. I had a
Really?
dysfunctional home and PCOS, acne, hair loss, all the things.
Yeah, out of nowhere too. But if I really look back at the timeline, it's like, oh, right when all of that was going on.
Oh my goodness. So one of the things, that I observed as a teenager and that I continue to talk about today, in witnessing my parents' dysfunction and how sick it made each of them, and even kind of where they've landed as, older people today, like I did not want that for myself, right? But I continue to witness so many relationships that, are toxic or are unhealthy. And then people come to my exam rooms and, wonder why they're not healing or wonder why they're not getting better. You guys have spent a lot of time in this space. You've built, a lot of tools and resources for couples, right? Navigating kind of the dynamics of relationships. Before we get into the nitty gritty, I'm curious how both of you landed in this space to begin with.
I mean, it started out of necessity. I was broken up with in my early relationships through, almost none in high school, and then college, a few cheated on. And so in the handful of relationships I had, they were very threatening. Like being in a relationship was threatening, to me because
Someone's going to
get
hurt
rejected,
you. Yeah.
right? So longer story, when we do finally get together, even though I tried to break up with her.
He
This
did?
is a whole other story.
Oh my
yes.
God. Okay. That's probably some psychology there too,
Yes.
right?
And it was.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, even though I was always on the receiving end of being broken up with, in that time period, she was more interested in me than I was of her. And so
Mm-hmm.
she was showing more affection and interest, and that kind of scared me. So then I said, I think we should just be friends, that whole thing.
Right.
Did it over the phone.
Oh.
But she called me right back. She called me immediately back. I remember at the time flipping that phone back open, and she said, you know what, that doesn't work for me. And I couldn't have told you ahead of time what phrase could she say that would have me be back in, because it really did go right down through the subconscious mind, because her saying that gave me reassurance and confidence that I didn't have to be as afraid of rejection. So fast forward that, we all have our patterns from our past that we
Yes,
bring
we
in,
do.
and so it wasn't like that healed all of it. So getting into the idea of being married, I said, I want to be successful. And I was used to playing sports and things like that. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I knew that if I practiced dribbling or shot 1,000, free throws, I would get better at basketball.
Right.
What could I do to get better at marriage and then feel reassurance and confidence that our marriage would be successful? So we sought that out
From the get-go,
from the
Early
get-go.
on.
without
Yeah.
any issues or
That's
anything
what
like
gave
that.
me confidence to propose to her. Was knowing I had a tool set. So naturally from there, I think people just started asking us, hey, do you have any sort of secrets? What are your tools? And just kind of naturally flowed into 10 years later, here we are.
Yeah. And the
Amazing.
motivation, yes, is absolutely just us early on. Our upbringings were so different. His
Mhm.
parents are going on their 5th decade of
Wow.
marriage,
Amazing.
whereas mine got divorced, and it was a
Right.
very tumultuous, unhealthy divorce. And so we brought in these completely different blueprints of what a relationship should look like. What does communication look like? What does conflict look like? So we had to reconcile all of that and say, we don't want to unconsciously bring in those patterns. We want to intentionally really say, what do we want this to look like and what's healthy? Let's learn. So from the beginning, we had a growth mindset, and that was really important to me in a relationship.
And actually, something to that point, when we reflect on our own upbringings, it would seem like mine was better.
Yeah.
But we all
Was
take
it?
away,
Yeah.
and in some regards it
Yeah.
was, right? The amount that my
Stability.
parents were there, my dad quit a corporate job to show up to my brother and I's sporting events and work at the school. So there is a sense of there was security, there was love, but I didn't get modeled emotional regulation or how to handle conflict. When there was a conflict with my parents, conversation immediately stopped. My dad walked out of the room. Next thing I know, we're in the backyard playing kickball. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
so I did grow up feeling like, oh, any sort of tension or conflict must be a problem. And then so when we got together, naturally a marriage faces conflict.
Of
So
course,
when we
yeah.
did, I had the tendency to shut down and not engage and pull away. And that caused her to feel more isolation, kind of abandonment. But then her patterns were, no, we're going to talk this out.
Yeah.
So now you got
We're
that.
gonna hit
that
this.
pursuer
You're gonna talk to
withdrawer.
me now.
And that causes more tension, right? Like,
Yeah.
don't force me into
Yeah,
something that I'm
totally.
uncomfortable with. So
Yeah.
we realized that, yes, there's certain aspects of having more structure and love and presence in the home is obviously better.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you can't control what your kids take away from what gets modeled.
Mm-hmm.
So I took away what I took away. And it's like, you're always going to have to reconcile with your partner. How do we negotiate needs? How do we handle conflict? How do we repair? So you're always going to have to do that.
So you're walking into your marriage more prepared than the ordinary couple, right? I think most people, even today, still have the fairy tale.
Yeah.
As we're talking, Travis and Taylor just got engaged,
Yes.
right? Like the fairy tale pictures are
and they're
everywhere.
in the honeymoon stage, which is awesome.
It's amazing, right? And we're all cheering for them and happy for them. But, most people walk away from an engagement or from a wedding thinking, okay, this is my person and everything's going to be amazing. And if you're the right person, then everything should be fine.
Right.
Like, therapy work is for people that have trouble.
Right.
It's not for people that truly love each other, and are dedicated to one another. What is wrong with that way of thinking?
Well, we probably have all heard it, right? That love is not enough for marriage.
Mm.
Like marriage is a whole other ball game. And we've met with a lot of couples who come to us and they really like the coaching approach, because I think a lot of people associate going to counseling as we're going to vent and then we're going to argue.
Right.
Whereas people come to us and they're like, we want the steps. Like we realize there's something we need to change and improve. We need the strategies. We need the tools. And we will meet with couples and they're amazing people. They
Right.
both work really hard.
Right.
They're both intelligent people. They want to be the best parents they can be. And the thing is, sometimes they feel like, if I'm a good person, shouldn't that be enough? But being a good person doesn't mean you know how to communicate, difficult feelings, or how to handle when you really disagree on something that's important. Because again, it's like what was modeled to you. It plays such a big role. And so I think we just like to flip the script. And I think that's why so many people are gravitating to our content, because
Yeah.
we're not saying you're a bad person, therefore you're having problems.
Right.
It's, hey, you just need some additional tools, skills. We all go through these things, because that's the other thing is, even certain challenges might not show up in the first few years of your relationship.
Right.
There can be certain challenges that you encounter that really unearth other fears and insecurities or patterns. And then definitely, and this is a lot of what we've been talking about lately, is a lot changes when you have kids. So it's like,
The
okay,
whole chapter.
yeah, some of
That's
that
a whole
stuff,
thing.
it
Yeah.
might not have manifested in the
Right.
first, several years of your relationship. And so just
Mhm.
even reframing that, hey, marriage, which we all hope is really this long journey,
Right.
like we're at a decade now. Our
I was
anniversary
about
is
to
in a couple
ask, how long
weeks.
have you guys been married?
Yeah, our
Okay.
10-year wedding
Okay.
anniversary is coming up, which,
Amazing.
since I know you love data and things like that, you might find it interesting that one of the largest meta-analysis studies found that marriage dissatisfaction
Mhm.
peaks at about 10 years together.
Interesting.
Yeah, so, and of
Okay.
course there's variances to that, but that's often associated when you're raising young
Right.
kids, when you're also really striving for career success.
Right.
So there's a
Mhm.
lot of pressure and stress on you. So we talk a lot about, too, what does it take to be together a long time and be satisfied?
Well, one of the things I've seen too, so I didn't know about the 10-year, and I think
Mhm.
that's super interesting. Talk about even longer. I'm hitting 21.
Amazing.
But but there are definitely like peaks and
Oh,
valleys
yeah.
to all of that, right? But one of the things I've noticed for sure, being in sort of a longer term, not necessarily in my relationship, but in like my peers and my patients and stuff
Mhm.
like that, is that there is an escalation of divorce around sort of this perimenopause menopause
Mhm.
time frame, which is somewhere like 45 to 55 or so.
Mhm.
You know, if the dissatisfaction is peaking at year 10, then why are we seeing the divorce rate peak
Mhm.
at 45 to 50, which is
Yeah.
probably closer to the 17, 18, 19,
Yeah.
20 year, time frame?
I was reading
Well,
about that too.
because
Yeah.
people have this idea that you stay together for the kids.
Mm.
It's a huge part of it, right? And, that's really where we're super passionate to talk about your marriage satisfaction plays as big of a role as your presence. So it's not just about staying together. You live in a household
Right,
for the kids,
right.
but your kids know. They feel it.
Everything.
They're intuitive. You have psychological principles that we already started this show off with, like emotional crossover and emotional spillover.
Talk about those a little bit, because I think a
Yeah.
lot of people, put the mask on and they want to be together for the kids, or like you were giving in your example,
Hmm.
which was different from mine. We had fireworks constantly in our childhood home. It
Yeah,
was
same.
not, we knew there was conflict, but a lot of homes run the way you are talking about, where one partner doesn't engage in conflict, walks out,
Mm.
right, or shuts down or disappears. What is the emotional spillover or crossover that
Hmm.
we need to be aware of?
Emotional spillover is where, like, in your own day to day as an individual, the emotions you have from one segment, like work, will
Mm-hmm.
spill over into your leisure or your family time.
Mm.
Emotional crossover is that my emotional state crosses over to a partner or my kids. So if I come home angry and then my actions and behavior are reactive to my kids, I'm going to cross over that emotion onto them.
Wow.
So, yeah, people think, well, we stay together for the kids. And it's usually focused on we provide for them, like, security and a home, and those things are important. But if you're staying together and having high reactivity and you're withdrawing from conflict and you're letting things escalate,
Or you're disconnected even.
all of that emotion is creating the environment within your home, and your kids feel that.
Mm.
So could we say that staying together is better than divorce? Well, it's about the emotional environment you're creating. And I think that needs attention paid to it. Like, the best scenario is you stay together and your marriage satisfaction is high, because that itself sends a lot of messages to your
Right.
kids, whether it's attachment and bonding or their own emotional regulation.
Even their performance in school,
It's
Hmm.
tied
right?
to
I mean,
this. Yeah.
absolutely, kids' performance and anxiety is higher when they're in a high conflict home. Or even, like you said, even when there's like they know conflict's there, but it's not being discussed, kids are so intuitive. And I think what we were talking about even before the show of our passion of really thinking about the whole ecosystem
Mm-hmm.
of their life, their family, and that health isn't just what you ingest, it's also your conversations, your connection, the whole home environment. And that's what we're really championing for is by focusing on your marriage, you are benefiting your entire family.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, I think we talked about this that families have a health ecosystem, right?
Mhm.
And you can have everybody like biohacking and supplementing and hormone replacement therapy, all the things, doing all the things. But if you're walking into an unhealthy ecosystem,
Hmm.
right, you're instantly going to have things like inflammation, high cortisol. I can get super granular with what the lab's saying, what the data
Mhm.
says, right? But that is what we are seeing, And so I think this idea of how do we heal our relationships, pick healthy relationships, and if we're not in a good one, how do we turn around from that? I think these ideas are really, really
Hmm.
important. And I think for mothers and fathers, like once you have children, the dynamic and the goals change significantly,
Yes.
right? So if we think about, so I have two questions. So question number one is there's marriage satisfaction that you both have brought up.
Mhm.
Does that also apply to just what if people don't get married? What about just relationship satisfaction? Are those like similar ideas or does marriage really change the dynamic?
I mean, of course, getting married does add in like a longer term commitment for a lot of people, but
Right.
like you talked about, some people are choosing not to get married, right?
Right.
That is rising today. We still find that the majority of people coming to us really do see the value in committing to each other, in being married. I think that our work could be applied to
Right.
just we want to be together a long time, we're committed to each other, and we want to be satisfied. So we use the term marriage and
Yeah.
people can apply it even if they don't get legally married.
Right.
We just personally believe that it is such a powerful declaration.
Yeah.
And so we're champions for marriage.
I am too. And I don't want to get a lot of hate mail from everybody, but this is going to apply to everyone.
Yes.
So, but anyhow, I'm going to continue to use the word marriage satisfaction as we
Mhm.
talk about this. So, I want to know what constitutes marriage satisfaction. Is there a way to be, sort of linear about it, have a
Mhm.
checklist of sorts, have
Yes.
something that we can like turn to and be like, okay, I'm satisfied?
Mhm.
Or is it more just an intuitive internal feeling that, we have to kind of sit with ourselves?
There's a couple ways that you could measure it because there's definitely everyone has in a sense like an unconscious checklist that they're looking for. So it is going to vary per person, but we could even just simplify it to what we call the 3 C's.
Okay.
How you feel in your connection, how you feel about your communication, and how you feel about your conflict resolution.
So easy to remember.
Right. So the 3 you can just do a quick check-in. How do we feel about the 3 C's? But connection, of course, is really, I think, the thing that we all deep down get into a relationship for. And within connection is feeling loved.
Mm.
It's feeling seen. It's feeling special to someone. It's experiencing intimacy. So there's lots of sub terms that you can go into, but we didn't get married to just say, hey, babe, let's survive
Right.
together.
Right.
Like let's make some babies and get jobs. Like that's not
See
what
you at
most
5.
right.
Right.
That's not what most of
Right.
us get married for. We get married for companionship, joy, being able to open up our hearts to someone, talk about the burdens that we have on our shoulders, and have someone to. We've been talking a lot about this as well. Is have someone to co-regulate with,
Right.
because you could say, I don't need a relationship. I'm going to do life. And there's a lot of people who can
We're
absolutely
choosing that.
be
Right.
fulfilled in that. But I also think that as human beings, like we want to co-regulate with someone, which what does that mean? So a lot of people are familiar with emotional regulation, which
Mhm.
is your ability to recognize and regulate what you're feeling. I'm stressed. What am I going to do with this emotion? But I also sometimes don't feel strong, or I want just to process with someone, or I want someone to give
Right.
me a hug
Right.
and tell me everything's going to be okay. So our nervous system's communicating with each other. And that's what parents are doing with their children a lot of times, or forgetting to do with their children, right? Is
Mhm.
co-regulating. And people forget, oh, my partner is someone that I can co-regulate with too.
So, as we're trying to establish marriage satisfaction, I love the way you're defining it with these 3 C's.
Mm-hmm.
How does resentment set in? What does that look like? Is there, again, a benchmark where you guys normally see resentment starting to set into a relationship? I know on my end, resentment looks like inflammation in the body. It's sort of the seeping early signs. And women are interesting, as are men. Women are very interesting because a lot of times they can't name it. They can't name the fact that they're resentful, but instead they're experiencing anxiety,
Or anger.
or anger,
Mhm.
and men, when they're resentful, I see a lot of anger actually with men. I
Mhm.
feel like that's the number one thing that we see with men.
Mhm.
So, is there a stage at which resentment starts to seep into a relationship? And can you turn that around?
Yeah.
I think, building off of where we've already come from, and psychology likes the terms emotional closeness.
Mm,
I think it gives more of a way to really think about your interactions. So, is your emotional closeness high or low? It also likes desire for proximity.
mm.
Like you
It's
want to be
very
around each
You want to
interesting.
other.
be near each
It's as
other.
simple as
Yeah.
that. Do
Okay.
you actually want to be physically around each other?
Mm,
And I think to your point, when that resentment builds, right, that desire for wanting to be around, especially for men, starts to lower, and you can see men do their own thing, be more independent. And then lastly, openness to forgiveness. And so, if that is really what drives marriage satisfaction, well, I would say if you start to reduce that, and then you feel you have to be in the marriage out of obligation, then those two factors create resentment. It's
mm.
like if we don't have emotional closeness, if I can feel there's not a desire for proximity and there's not a lot of willingness to forgive and repair, but I have to be in this relationship,
Mhm.
who wants to feel obligated to do anything?
Right.
I think, and that breeds suffering, right? So if we also suffering comes from that which we feel we don't choose. So if you're feeling like you're not choosing this state of the marriage, but you have to be in it, you suffer more. The longer you suffer, the more resentment grows.
And I also think that when we are interacting with couples, what really starts to happen in their interactions, as Aaron is really describing, is they start to feel like they can't bring something up without
Mhm.
it becoming a fight.
Mm,
So it's like, okay, there's this maybe thing I'm wanting more of in our relationship, or something I'd like to talk about, or something I want to see change. If I bring it up, how receptive are you going to be?
right.
And if it feels like I try a few times and you're either defensive, dismissive, turns into a fight, now I'm going to not bring it up.
Right.
Then I say that little seed grows and becomes weeds.
Mm,
And what happens is your perception of your partner changes. They go from being this person that you can confide in, that you trust, that you can't wait to see at the end of the day, to, should I say this? Should I not? Are they going to be receptive? Oh, they're dismissive again. And they're no longer, Prince Charming or that princess to you. They're this person that you're afraid is going to react.
you're walking on eggshells all the time.
Let's
Yeah.
Yeah.
let's add one more thing, because a lot of what we end up seeing under the surface for couples is this idea: I don't get to be myself, or I
Mm,
don't get to be the best version of myself.
Mm.
I hear
So
that a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
In marriage, you really need your partner to be your champion, your cheerleader, the place where you get encouragement to pursue being the best version of yourself. So with everything that Jocelyn is saying too, if you're not open to hearing each other's needs and meeting them, on top of if you're not encouraging each other to grow in the areas of your own interest, you start to feel more limited and constrained. I can't get to be myself. I
Right.
don't get to fly. You really don't want your partner to feel like this anchor that pulls you down, to not be the person, or your soul came here, right, to express your highest gifts and talents. And you want your marriage to be a place that supports and encourages that.
Well, let's say, their marriages of different stages and different lengths of time. And let's say some bad habits have been happening, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's, shutting down, not communicating, not being
Yeah.
close, whatever it is. Can couples turn around from that?
Mm.
And if they do turn around from that, what makes somebody successful? What
Mhm.
works essentially?
Mm.
When, maybe there's this history of, some of these habits and patterns being laid.
Mhm.
Yeah. 100% people can change if they have that mindset. I was saying to someone, we were on another interview, and I said the biggest red flag I think in marriage is if they say, "Oh, I don't believe in that stuff.
Mm,
I don't believe in therapy. I don't believe in coaching, those self help books." When they're dismissive of that, What they're really saying is, I'm not willing to look at myself.
Right.
And so having a growth mindset is so important in marriage. And what does that
Oh
mean?
my
It
gosh,
just
you need to say that again.
having a growth mindset
Everyone's
is
listening.
yes,
Yeah.
because here's the thing, like as human beings, what's so cool about us is we can adapt.
Yeah.
We can evolve, we can improve. Like that is what's incredible about being a human being. We are not perfect. We've been together, 12 years, actually 10
Right.
married. We haven't been perfect every single day.
Right. None of us are.
We've had rough patches, even a month ago, a little
Yeah.
bit of a rough patch.
Yeah.
But the thing that we have going for us is we're always willing to take feedback from each other. Of course, lovingly. Like there's a
Right.
way to make sure the feedback is loving and not critical.
And I would say in the broader perspective,
Yeah.
not always the micro. We try to be honest. Like
Yeah.
there's moments where I'm not wanting to get feedback right
If it feels like it's too much at one time, right? But generally, like if we will talk about why do things feel off between us? We're feeling friction, we're feeling tension. Let's not let this spiral. Let's talk about why, and we'll hear each other's perspective out and say, okay, that's a good point. I will work on that. I will adjust that. And then we're both accountable people.
Right.
Right? So we're people that we don't need to be reminded every day. It's like, okay, I'm focusing on that, and I'm going to show my partner I'm capable of adapting
Yeah.
and changing. And so that's why I think anyone can realize, all right, we've gotten off track in our marriage.
Right.
And as long as both people are humble enough to look in the mirror, they're, have a growth mindset, you can absolutely
You can get
overcome those
through it.
patterns.
And there's probably a lot more for you to even ask on that, but this is a good way, taking a page out of Jocelyn's book.
Yeah.
One partner can spark change, but it takes two to sustain the change.
That's a good one. That's so important. And I was actually about to ask, is there a gender sort of spread amongst who has a growth mindset and who does not? Again, I sit with both men and women, right? And I have my own opinions, but I often hear that, well, so and so doesn't think anything's wrong. So, I'm going to get a divorce or whatever,
Right.
Do you find that men are more resistant to change, or
we both got something to say
think
on
that
this?
women are more resistant to change?
Okay, you go and then I'll say something.
This is such a great question, and I think a lot of it has to do with this point that we've really noticed that what men seek for, like their need, is different than what women would say.
Okay.
So we find that men are really looking for harmony, and then they measure that based on the amount of conflict.
Like they think things are harmonious if we aren't arguing.
Got it.
So
Okay,
therefore
think of most men like seeking, like that's their goal.
Okay.
Like, hey, bro, how's your marriage doing? If it's harmonious because there's not a lot of conflict, it's going well. Women need connection. So those are very different things. So without being too general, I would say women will tend to feel that the marriage isn't doing as well because the connection is down. And so they feel there needs to be more change when connection again being down. So men can tend to stay in a marriage season feeling like it's better because it's harmonious, just because there's not conflict. So all that to be said, I think women have more of the intuition that something needs to change earlier.
Interesting.
However, I do want to invite men to have more of a pulse on that your marriage doing well has also more to do with how your partner's doing, not just how you feel it is. So I think men are a little bit more resistant in the beginning. I think, to your point, a lot of the ideas of therapy, that something's wrong, that has men be more resistant. And that's why we brought a coaching mentality forward, right? Most men have played some sort of sport or
Right.
been with a team.
Right.
Hey, the team needs to get better here.
Yeah.
Okay, there's nothing personal. You don't need to internalize that. We're not making you feel bad. Let's gain some skills together so that we both can be on a winning team. Men seem to be more open to that. So that's how we've kind of
Phrased it.
had
Gotcha.
men feel more open to it. But if we were to generalize, I think women do feel that there's more of a need, because when connection is down, men might be a little bit more resistant. But if you can meet them where they're at with, hey, we're not making you feel bad, there's some skills and tools, that usually gets them on
Then
board.
they respond
There's
better to
so
that.
much that's changing too with marriage right
Yeah.
now. I mean, we were even briefly
Yeah, let's
talking
talk
about
about
just
that.
even generations before.
Right.
What men witnessed was typically mom was home. dad went off to work. Then when
Right.
dad came home, maybe sat on the couch,
Everything was pretty.
right, waited for
So,
dinner.
right. Yeah.
And so that was real. That was one generation ago.
Right.
And so, but now
Mm.
I think it's 65% of households have both people working.
Right.
And so that isn't the dynamic anymore. But there's like, if you think about it, it's like what was modeled to us though. So right now, this generation is the cycle breaking generation, right? It's like, okay, our culture has changed, what families look like, dynamics. And so, okay, my dad didn't necessarily model to me what it looks like to be emotionally attuned or maybe be the most affectionate, just as an example, the most
Mhm.
affectionate of husbands. He provided.
Right.
But now I'm supposed to be this emotionally attuned, present, loving, but I didn't have that example. So it's a very kind of conflicted time because we didn't have those examples and yet we're
Mm.
wanting to create that in our relationship. So there's a lot of change that's required in
Mm.
this time, which can feel challenging at
Well, how
times. It's
do we
not
do
easy.
that? I mean,
Mhm.
how, there's all this talk about family stress and family cortisol, who should work, who should not work, whose career
Mhm.
goes first, whose goes second, how you stair step all of that stuff, and I don't think it's fair to either partner for them to make a choice that they're not 100% comfortable with, right?
Mhm.
Mm.
So, how do we set up a modern marriage? Like you and I were joking a little bit. There was the 1950s marriage
Mhm.
where, husband went away and everything was beautiful and pretty and you didn't burden them and it was harmonious,
Mm.
very harmonious, right,
Mhm.
for the guy because nothing was like, blown up in
Mhm.
front of their face. And then we moved away from that into kind of what I call the 70s, 80s, 90s marriages where, women, I felt like were just taking it all on, like
Mhm.
still trying to maintain this harmonious environment. And now I feel like we're in this other phase, and I don't have a word for it yet, but where it's like, okay, I'm going to get married, but I'm out the door in like
Mhm.
5 seconds if X, Y, and Z
Mm.
goes wrong.
Mhm.
So, how do we, preserve the institution of marriage, which I do think, and I don't want to wax too poetic about it, but I do feel like it's a spiritual journey
It is.
and it forces you out of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
It's much easier to not be married, but being married is a journey.
Yeah.
So if we're going to continue to, talk about marriage as a healthy institution, for families and a way to build and grow families, how do we navigate the modern marriage, the marriage of the future, where you have, badass women marrying badass men
Mhm.
and everyone hopefully creating a harmonious family unit? How,
Right.
how do we do that?
Because right now it really is so much more about partnership,
Right.
right? It's like I want a partner to grow with, to evolve with. And we also believe it's a spiritual journey.
Yeah,
We believe it's a self-development journey. So
totally.
every
Just like
challenge,
parenthood,
yes, it is.
also a spiritual
Parenthood
journey.
is.
Like,
Yeah, we are not just equipped to be the best
right,
parents. There's
right,
so much to learn. We also aren't equipped to be the best partners. There's so much to learn. So we view any challenge that shows up in our marriage as something to teach us
right,
to become better. That's why we don't back down from it, because otherwise, you know what's going to happen? That challenge will show up in the next relationship.
right.
Like that is always the truth. And so we really do encounter challenges with that mindset. So going back to the partnership piece, it's really like, all right, we both want to create a beautiful life. What does fulfillment look like for you? Because I want you to feel so fulfilled in this lifetime, and same for me. So, what does supporting each other's journey look like? And that's about communication. That's being able to talk about, yeah, you know what? These are my dreams. These are my goals. This is my vision. Are you on board with that?
Mhm.
Cool. Okay, let's create that together.
Mm-hmm.
But what that means is we're going to have to become the people that can fulfill on that. That's why that growth mindset is
The
so
growth
key.
mindset. Okay, let's
And
go back
I'll
to,
just also
yeah,
add, like,
jump in.
part is needed, like the cultural shift too,
Right.
where I feel like it's really been great. So whether you call it like self empowerment, but if you think of holistically, we live in a individualistic society. You might
Right.
say the
Right.
West is
Right.
also
Very
very driven
individualistic. Yeah.
by consumerism and like marketing. And self-care, which is important, has sort of supplanted mutual care.
Mm.
Mutual care is so pivotal to marriage. And I don't want to say you sacrifice yourself, but we've kind of become a little bit too not
Individualistic.
selfish, but individualistic and self-focused, where it's more like I put up my boundaries and I have my self-care prioritized over anything else, where I need to feel good. So, you take the kids, don't talk to me until my cup is full. And it's not really the case, because pro-social behavior, me doing something for my partner or anyone else, causes an increase in serotonin, oxytocin. It boosts the atmosphere, it boosts my own hormones. Now we're using emotional crossover for our benefit. My raising through mutual care adds to the whole environment of the home. So we can't wait till our cup is full, because that's just not how
It
mutual
works.
care and
Right.
pro-social behavior actually works.
Talk to us about mutual care. Give us maybe
Mhm.
3 examples of what mutual care might look like. And I agree with you. Like
Mhm.
American culture is very individualistic. It's very me, me, me. And you see many couples, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, many couples that this is my thing, but there's not a lot of our things, you
Mhm.
know? So what does mutual care look like if we want to start rethinking self-care and moving it to this model?
So this is great, because I like the biohacking stuff too.
Yeah.
I like cold plunging. I
Yep.
like red light
Yep.
saunas. And so if her and I are in a conflict, I can go do that. And I can be sitting in the cold plunge
Mm.
tub, and it down regulates my emotions to an extent, but I can still be frustrated.
Right.
I can still feel upset that she did something. So we're not repaired. So there's no way for me to feel good about the relationship. I can get my nervous system to a level, but mutual care is like, okay, downregulate my own emotions, but let me be willing to come to her first and say, you know what? And I might feel fully justified that she
Right.
was at fault.
Right.
But mutual care would really be like, you know what? Let me see where I can take responsibility. Maybe I made a promise and I didn't follow through. Well, there's an impact there.
Mm.
So let me come to
Mhm.
her. I'm regulated because I did my cold plunge, but let me come to her and say, you know what? I take responsibility that I made a promise
Mm.
that I was going to do XYZ and I didn't follow through. Probably has you feel a little bit like you couldn't trust me, or that more was put on you. And I apologize for that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, I still might have some things I'm upset about. I might be hurt by something, but part of the mutual care is I'll put that aside and being willing to repair with you first. And then now we really activate all these mutual care systems within our body.
I think to add on to that too is to really think about, does my partner know today that I love them? We can assume that just because we're there, we're doing our
Mm,
functions, our
uh-huh.
responsibilities, that they feel loved.
Mm.
And your
Mm,
presence alone
It's not enough.
doesn't necessarily make them
yeah.
feel loved. And so Aaron has this great challenge that he'll offer to husbands when he's talking to them is, I want you to wake up every single day and ask yourself, does my wife know that I love her today yet?
Mm.
And I think if, of course, both partners do that, it doesn't have to be grandiose gestures every single day. We're busy too. We're not
Right.
saying how you have to
Right.
be
Right.
laying out rose petals to dinner every single
Right.
day, but just the little things that make your partner feel special. Getting their coffee for them, right?
Yeah.
Rubbing their back as you
Yeah.
walk by.
Tiny things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all those little what we call love deposits
Yeah. Love
really.
deposits. I
Yeah, like a
like
bank
that.
account, right?
I like that.
Think about the love account,
Yeah.
right? So you got this love account, which is a representation of how loved and connected you feel right now.
Right.
And just like a bank account, it's a
Mm,
sum of your deposits versus your withdrawals.
Yeah.
And of course, early in a relationship, you're making a ton of deposits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because you're in the
Mm-hmm.
honeymoon stage, right?
Right.
So it's all this positive, positive, positive.
and almost no withdrawals.
Right.
You grant forgiveness, benefit of the doubt, you let
Right.
things go. So there's almost no withdrawals in the beginning.
But the longer you're together, you start to make way more withdrawals
Mm.
and then fewer deposits
Mhm.
if you're not being intentional.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
So it's really being conscientious of what's the ratio of my deposits versus withdrawals from my partner. So that's again going back to that mutual care is the repair as Aaron was talking about, but also am I making my partner feel loved?
A lot of this too comes back to your own personal health, right? And
Mhm.
how you're showing up in the relationship, right? There are many people that, we went through this in our marriage and have gone through it a couple of times where somebody's physical health sort of lends itself to a lack of
Mm.
energy, a lack of bandwidth, a lack
Mhm.
of regulation. What is the responsibility each person in a family and in a relationship or marriage in particular has to their own health. Like men, and not to knock men, I love men, but not to knock them. I think we as women, because we have a cycle and because we get pregnant and because we breastfeed and then we go into perimenopause and menopause, like we're always aware of what's happening with us physically. We're very like, oh my gosh, what's going on here today? I gained weight, I lost weight, this is happening, all this stuff is constantly happening with us, whereas men seem to be a little bit more static because they are not sort of driven by this hormonal cycle and these changes that dramatically, but they're still really unhealthy, and I feel like, as I sit with men, they bring that element of being physically unhealthy, which is then impacting their mental health and their emotional health into their relationships. And so then when you go and say, hey, I'd like to communicate, or I don't feel connected, or, I'd like to do X, Y, and Z, there's no bandwidth. There's no reserve left to receive that. And a lot of their, shutting down and checking out or whatever else is purely a lack of energy. But that doesn't excuse it. So what do you say about men and how they show up in a relationship from a physical standpoint? Same for women. I'd be curious, like, if, what your experience has been with that.
Yeah, I think it's multi-layered, but if we start with the like psychological, it's that hero's journey. And I think the hero's journey is in ways even more important for men. And whether it's like stories of like King Arthur or more modern day, like even take Harry Potter, men need to feel like they're striving for something, right? That brings purpose, that brings meaning to their own individual life. And I think men need that. We all need that. It's part of this balance between what we're really out to achieve together. So there's like a collaborative vision for the marriage, but men really need to feel, which we often do. I'm saying we as in men,
Right.
when we're on a sports team earlier on, when we're in our early education, like we're striving for a degree or we're striving for getting a certain job, there's this goal that we strive for. And so that puts us on a hero's journey. And men need that. But as we get further into our life, we don't then remake what that is, right? So we're in a marriage, we're in our job. We need a new aim. You need to set a new hero's journey for yourself, because that creates a spark, that creates the meaning and the purpose that you strive for. And when you have that thing that is the internal passion, we just know that our physical body needs to be a match to that. So we'll look at our nutrition,
So
we'll
you'll
look at our
naturally look at that.
exercise. But I think we need the psychological aim. And I think that then pulls you down into, well, I want my body to feel
Yeah.
that it can have the energy for that purpose. Now, everything you said, now I have more energy for the marriage, for my partner. It just really builds upon itself.
As you were asking the question,
Yeah.
the words that came to me were around self-esteem and coping mechanisms, right? So I really think about, for either one of us, if we weren't taking care of ourselves, our mind, our body, our soul, our self-esteem would be lower. Or if not even our health too, right? If we weren't feeling good professionally, which there have
Right.
been times even where
Right.
I'm like, comparing
Yes, all the
myself,
time. All the
right?
time.
And so
Right.
if my self-esteem is lower for any reason, that's of course going to show up. If he were to bring up a topic in our marriage, I would maybe be more sensitive to that. So, I mean, definitely there are times where we'll be in sessions and either partner, maybe they were laid off
Right.
or they have had a really hard time with a child, right? So
Right.
they're feeling like inadequate, like they're not doing a good job. They might not say it because we all have pride, right?
Right.
Like, I'm fine. I'm
I
good.
got
Yeah.
this.
Right.
Yeah.
But really deep down, when they open up and they get vulnerable, it's like, I'm not feeling good about myself. And so that's going to, of course, be reflected in your interactions. And then the other word around coping mechanisms. I mean, as adults, I think that's so important that we're always checking in. How are we taking care of ourselves when we're stressed? And so we actually, one thing, we're going on 5+ years now, we have not had a drip of alcohol. And
Interesting.
it was because, I
Oh,
mean,
you have to talk about that.
well,
Yeah.
you started to just really not like the way you were feeling. I started having like allergic reactions. I wasn't
Yeah.
sleeping at night. So I was like, this isn't even fun.
Yeah.
And I come from a whole family of alcoholism and addiction. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm having reactions. I'm not sleeping well. I come from a line of addiction. Like, why would I do this? Thankfully, now there's a lot of great,
Right.
mocktails.
Mocktails are the thing.
Right? Like, even last night, I had non-alcoholic tequila
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
margarita. I'm like, how does this
Yeah.
exist? That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
But we met in a gym, thankfully. So working
Health
out
is
has
a
always been a
right.
value of ours. And
Right.
I think if either one of us wasn't taking care of ourselves, we would check in on each other.
Yeah.
Hey, like, you haven't maybe seemed like yourself. But again, we just really believe we aren't going to show up as the best partners, parents, or people if we aren't really thinking about the whole like ecosystem
Of
as
our
we've been
health,
talking
right?
about.
And I think, for women, the self-esteem piece shows up in different ways through physical
Mm-hmm.
appearance, through, for women, a lot of it's tied to what's happening at home. I've
Yes.
noticed, even if they're maybe even struggling at work, but I think the home is a very important piece for women. For men, it's the workplace, right? They
Mm.
need that hero's journey. They need that like accomplishment drive. And if something goes wrong there, then that can definitely impact their self-esteem. How do you help men? I've sat with men and I can actually see their faces as we're talking, but who are in it. They have like the kids and the wife, and there's disconnection, and the kids are demanding, and there's financial pressure, and they just feel kind of trapped and hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them may engage in destructive behaviors, right,
Mm-hmm.
which we can talk about in just a second. But how do you guide men out of that space? Because I think that can be a loop that they stay in, and no matter how much communication you try or connection you try, if they're in that loop, they have a really hard time seeing their way out of it.
Mm-hmm. You know what comes to me not as like a specific answer, but it's like even all the data shows
Yeah.
women are so much better at maintaining relationships. And so as men get older, and I just turned 40,
Yeah.
we just don't have the same friendships. Like men maintaining
Mm-hmm.
authentic, deep, also just fun friendships where you go and do kind of men type of things that elicit testosterone.
Right.
I think that's a big missing,
Mm.
and we don't necessarily know the answer because men just don't have that same nurturing relationship type of thing. I think we're more proximity driven. So it's, my coworkers, we haven't stayed in touch with, some people over the years, or we've changed as individuals. And so we don't know where to go. It's harder for men just to strike up conversations with
Right.
another man because we
Right.
feel
Weird about
weird
it.
about it for some reason, right? But most of the men I talk to would love that.
Yeah.
But we just have this kind of shield or shell that it is some kind of a gender stereotype that you don't just go up to another guy. But most of the men I've talked to and been approached, like, man, we met at the gym, and that can become a really strong
Mm-hmm.
friendship pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
I also think too, I'm not a man, but I talk to a lot of men,
Yeah.
right?
Of
And I
course.
research,
Yeah. Yeah.
men and women. There's still a shift happening. It's way different now than it was decades before, of really like men acknowledging what they're feeling,
Mm.
letting themselves say, I'm overwhelmed, or I'm stressed, or I'm not feeling adequate or successful. Or I mean, there was one husband in particular, he comes right to my mind, is they had 2 young kids, beautiful home, right? This marriage, even family lived near them. So they had all this
The support.
formula.
Yeah.
But he was in a job that when he got really honest, he was like, I actually don't think I'm equipped for this job.
Mm.
And how that was manifesting was he was very reactive, very getting quick to anger. And so once he started to acknowledge, wow, I either need more training or maybe I actually need a different position in this, because he was trying to be someone he wasn't.
Right.
And so there was just like some like having to fake it. And so I think, again, just my observation with men is like being able to just, whether they want to talk to a friend, their spouse, a therapist, an AA group, anyone, to just
Right.
acknowledge how they're feeling instead of masking it and then compensating, right? Alcohol, different substances. There's a whole other
There's a whole
realm.
list. Right. Yeah.
And really,
Let's
like,
talk about that
men have
list
feelings
for
too.
a second, though. Like, because I think men hit a breaking point and then
Mm,
engage in behavior X, Y, or Z,
yeah.
right? So, what would you tell men, and women or anybody in a marriage, honestly, like what are the signs and symptoms? Why do people cheat? How do you turn around from that? Is that
Mm.
possible? Like, cheating to me is equivalent to drug abuse, all
Emotional.
the other behaviors that, lack
Mm-hmm.
emotional regulation basically. So how do you like help people out of those particular
Mm.
situations and maybe practice a more
Yeah.
preventive approach?
Yeah, we would focus on the prevention because we don't focus on couples who are, dealing with infidelity. We would
Right.
refer them elsewhere. That's not
Gotcha.
our specialty. But on the prevention side, it really comes down to talking about your boundaries.
Mm.
And we think about boundaries in two ways: the boundaries between you two, and then the boundaries around your relationship. And being able to realize, I can't be naive and just think, oh, I'm a good person, so therefore I would
Everything will
never
be
do anything
okay.
like that.
Right.
Right. And so even couples recently that we've talked to where there was even just some struggle to trust each other, even though nothing had happened yet.
Right.
One partner traveled a lot for work.
Yep.
And they thought it was okay, but they would have drinks and there were male and female colleagues, and then they wouldn't get to the room till midnight. And when they would talk, it's like, well, one of them's really cute. And you can't be naive. You really have to think, what are the boundaries and the ways that we're going to protect our relationship
Mm.
from any external influence, right? And so I think it's that open, honest communication with each other and ourselves.
Yeah.
This is an important relationship, so therefore I want to protect it.
Do you find that men or women don't take care of themselves and then are more vulnerable to these external influences? Does that happen?
It's not like a main focus for us,
Yeah.
but definitely men and women can be not taking care of themselves, not feel good, not be communicating. And then when they're not communicating, right, our attention can go elsewhere.
Right.
So
Okay.
like temptation can really happen for anyone when they're like, well, I'm not getting what I want or need here. But it's like, have you talked about it?
Right.
Have you tried to address that? As opposed to, coping elsewhere.
And I feel like for a lot of the women that I sit with too, many women think that it's their responsibility or they're feeling burned out in a way that they're trying to keep the marriage going or the relationship going. They're doing all the work. They're arranging the dinners and the vacations and the fun activities.
Yeah.
And they're responsible for, like, one friend of mine, was cracking me up. She's like, I do the play dates for my husband. I'm in
Yeah.
charge of play dates for him. Like,
Mhm.
I'm in charge of his social group.
The mental load.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Why is that happening today?
Yeah.
And like, what would we tell women to do differently? What would we tell men?
Yeah.
I think it comes down to, there's even personality traits called like agreeableness. And so I think men have tended, and it comes from like an initially good intent, but men can become more agreeable,
Mm-hmm.
but to not just a level of being considerate, but that you're actually being compliant.
Mm.
And that's like a really key distinction. Like you want to be agreeable to where you're considering each other's needs and opinions and ideas, and you can share with one another, and there's openness to hearing the needs and following through on them for each other. But men, I have seen, also then are less assertive. So we become less assertive and more agreeable from a compliance standpoint. So all that being said, it's like I'm just a yes man.
Mm.
My partner suggests something, yeah,
But
let's
that's
do
not
that.
Happy
good,
wife,
right?
No,
happy
it's not.
life.
It's not good at all.
Yeah.
And because it's like I don't want to challenge or I don't want to cause conflict, and so that's the gray line.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
I'm not challenging you. You're bringing something to me. I'm not saying I don't like that, but I need to be more proactive and more assertive about what I do want and what I don't want. And even if it's contrary, it's like, well, let me provide an alternative. I'm not just shooting my partner's ideas down. So then what can women do better of? I think a little bit more openness so that we feel accepted. So if I'm going to bring something to you, especially if I haven't been as assertive and I bring an idea to you, do not shoot it down.
Right away. Yeah.
Allow it.
A
Let
lot of
it
women do that.
ruminate. Let's
Yeah.
talk about it because it might seem not a big deal to a female partner to say, oh, and let's not do that. Let's not eat there.
Right.
Let's not try that. I don't want to do that vacation. But for a man that's not as open to being assertive and proactive, it's the smallest thing that will feel like a rejection.
So it's
Now,
rejection.
yeah, and not even like it's not
Wow.
malicious.
Right.
It's just that, okay, something's been brewing. I haven't been saying it, so I may even say it pretty passively.
Right.
But if it seems like it's rejected, now I'm not going to do that again. So now I'm back in the yes man, the compliance, and resentment is really starting to build for me to where now my psychology is saying my partner doesn't care about my ideas. I'm just functioning. I'm just someone that is only here to provide financial security. It's just a bad path
It's a
to
bad
then
path to go down.
be on. So
I also think about, in addition to personality, going back to even just modeling. I think it's really important that both partners, whether they're early in their relationship or even like when you go through a big transition like having kids,
Right.
to really openly talk about what was modeled to you.
Right.
What did you witness your dad do, your mom do? Do you think that's right? Do you think that we would want to do things differently? Because we can by default just repeat. Like, well, that's what they did. That's how they
So,
operated. And
a lot
so,
of couples today, are, of course, raising children together, but some of them are even in business together,
yeah.
right?
Mm.
Working together. And there's some dynamics that come out from there as well. Some do it very successfully, some not so much, and it
Hmm.
actually blows things apart.
Yeah.
Could we give anyone listening just some tools? Like, what would you tell them as they're raising children, building businesses, working together?
Hmm.
What are some big red flags or some maybe just proactive preventive tools
Yeah.
to make sure everything that they're working for stays intact?
Yeah. So I would say absolutely a daily quick check-in with
Okay.
each other, and not a, hey, did you pick that up at the store? Hey, what do we need to do in the morning again? An emotional check-in. As simple as, hey babe, I know you've been like really working hard on that. How's that going for you? An emotional check-in every single day. Then a weekly, a little bit more in depth, what we call a family meeting. And that is a little bit longer of just a check in of making sure, yes, how are we both doing? Let's check in on that love account. We actually have couples ask on a scale of 0 to 10, where's your love account at?
Mm,
Because then you can catch it rather than like it's been a few weeks of declining. You can catch it when it's a 6 instead of a 2. So that's a big piece as well. And then is there anything we need to clean up between us? So we're big on prevention and
right.
proactive communication. So that daily quick check-in and then a longer weekly check-in, going into the love account, anything to clean up between us, those go a very long way.
Mhm.
So would you say 5 minutes a day minimum,
Yep.
couple of hours a week
Mm-hmm.
minimum of
Yeah,
really
especially if you're
diving
gonna try
in?
to work together, yeah.
It's amazing.
And also
Yeah.
because we do work together, we can say, making it very clear when we don't want to talk about business stuff too. Like really
I've
having a
always
time.
wondered how people navigate that one.
We'll just openly say, hey, I don't want to, let's not talk business stuff right now.
Oh my
Because otherwise
gosh.
it can bleed into dinner and you're on a walk and you're talking about it and it just starts to feel like there's
So
no
then is it
separate
important
relationship.
for families and those couples to cultivate interest outside
Of
of
course.
like
Mhm.
the to-do list,
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
whether you're like we're going on a bucket list trip to Banff, Canada
Oh,
coming
fun.
up. So
Yeah.
talk about the trip, talk
Yeah.
about a goal, a vision, something with our daughter, even just like funny, lighthearted conversations, something we read in the news or a funny clip, like definitely nurturing the friendship too,
Mhm.
nurturing the romantic relationship so it doesn't start to feel like it's just business.
So many great tools. I have so many like buzzwords in my head now. Emotional crossover,
Mm.
Yeah.
emotional spillover,
Mm.
Yeah.
your love
Yeah.
account. Are you in a love debt or love surplus or
Mhm.
withdrawals? So many great tools to hopefully help marriages
Mm.
and families thrive. I think marriage satisfaction is something we need to think about. I think we do need to acknowledge all the forces at play, right?
Mhm.
Which is your physical health, your mental health,
Mhm.
your emotional health individually, but we do need to start thinking about health in ecosystems, and
Mhm.
marriage has its own health
Huge.
barometer.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that we really need to get the message out, and both partners are responsible for
Yeah.
managing that. If you had one last piece of parting advice to everybody listening,
Oh.
what would you tell them?
Gosh, I think just really to prioritize your relationship, to make sure that in addition to the amount that you give to your kids, to your career, to yourself, to make sure that your relationship is thriving.
What
Mhm.
would you say?
Yeah, just it's been so helpful just to see marriage as a evolving journey. And on that journey, like the most important thing, even with some psychology theories, is adaptability.
Yeah.
You have to recognize that I'm on my own journey spiritually, that I'm here to fulfill on what my soul came here to do. Recognize that my partner is here on the same journey. I think when we see each other as very rigid, there you are again, I know exactly how you're going to respond, you fit them into this box, then there's no curiosity.
Yeah.
So recognizing that we're both on our own individual soul journeys, we came together for a larger purpose, that marriage journey is going to evolve. Then there's a lot more curiosity, there's a lot more future focus, there's a lot more interest in how can I support you being the person you're meant to be as well. So all of that's been really important as we go through seasons.
And I think the biggest takeaway that, I hope everyone kind of latches into is you have to have a growth mindset.
Yes.
As partners, as parents, we
Mhm.
have to have that growth mindset to really allow that family stability, that family vision, that family connection
Mhm.
to take place. And that brings about marriage satisfaction.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, my final question,
Yes.
my favorite question is what makes you whole? And you can both answer. I wonder
Mm.
if you're going to answer the same. Oh, wait, you're going to steal each other's answers. All right, I'll let you go first.
That is such a deep and difficult question
Right.
to answer what makes me whole, I mean, lately it has been having a larger spiritual perspective
Yeah.
to really look at anything that's happening as it's happening for me.
Mm.
And just to, rather than kind of reducing it to just getting things done or why is this happening? So just the larger spiritual perspective
To
and
being connected to that.
yeah.
I love that.
Mhm.
What about
Actually,
you?
it's the same. I didn't know if we were gonna have the same
Okay,
one,
got it.
but yeah, it is the certainty that everything that happens in our life, to be general, like it actually is for a purpose. And even things that are bad that seem to be obstacles in the short term are actually for the evolution of our souls, that ultimately everything does lead to our own benefit.
I think if we could get that message to everybody entering into marriage, then we would see marriage very differently,
Mhm.
right? It is about a soul journey and an evolution and learning lessons and kind of breaking through that and really modeling that for your children for them to carry forward as well.
100%.
This has been so
This has been
great. I
great.
love this episode. Well,
Me
thank you
too.
both for taking time out to join me today. I appreciate it. Maybe share with our listeners and
Yeah.
viewers like where they can find more information about you.
Yeah. So our website and our Instagram handle is Meet the Freemans.
Meet the
So you can go to
Freemans.
Meet
I
the
love it.
Freemans. Everything's on there. We have in-person workshops. We have challenges. We'll be announcing our next book. We can't say the title yet,
Okay, I was
but
gonna
that'll be
say.
coming
All
in the
right,
coming
excellent.
months. So everything's there. Meet the Freemans.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for your time today. I so appreciate it. And for everybody else watching and listening, remember, we share new episodes every week. This is a good one. Make sure you share it with all the families and couples that you know.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Whole Plus. Be sure to share this episode with your friends and family. And if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. To engage with the community, follow @LiveWholePlus and check out our website, wholeplus.co. That's HOLPLUS.co for more resources and information on holistic health. See you next time.